We don't really call ourselves sound artists. We use sound as a tool to transport. It struck me years and years ago. I was on the phone with someone and I could hear seagulls, and all of a sudden I was there with them on the beach.
Walking along a sandy beach.
For me, it's like time and space travel.
Well, we met in art school a very long time ago. We started working on art together as soon as we met. Our first date, you said, "Can you hold the camera while I'm doing this?"
Windows to put your head in, so you can put your head in, you hear different
You're
sounds.
still imagining this is gonna happen?
Yeah.
It's been sitting here for 15 years.
Also, the reason that it works is because we're really different people. I get up
Not very
early
much.
and I have a silent house and everything like that. George gets up, put on the music.
Working with Janet, I've become much more sensitive to that, become much more aware of everything around.
I've always been super sensitive with sound. Somebody can walk into the kitchen and I'll scream and jump up a foot. I think it comes from growing up on a farm, and one of my favorite things was always just the silence. You know, and you hear the birds, you hear the train off in the distance, and going into the forest. And I think I've always wanted to bring back that sense with sound.
We always thought it'd be kind of cool to open a space that young people could come to and see something that isn't normal for them to see in this area.
There was an old furniture showroom space in Enderby, BC,
20,000 square feet, and it has quite high ceilings.
almost like 20-foot ceilings.
Yeah,
So,
perfect for our work.
yeah.
So this is the gear for 40 Part Motet. So you follow the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Starting to count down in here. This is just to check that all the speakers are engaged.
17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30.
The idea for 40 Part Motet came from when I was in London recording. The singer gave me a CD of Thomas Tallis, Spem and Alium. And she said, "This is 40-part harmony. It's the most complex piece of music ever." I said immediately to George, "George, we have to do this one in 40 different speakers."
She's all pumped up about this idea, and I was trying to dissuade her, actually, I think. This is 2000, and the technology would be so expensive to play 40 channels.
At the same time, a producer in England invited me to commission an artwork, and I said, "Well, I have an idea."
So I've been a media conservator at the Museum of Modern Art for 13 years now. Traditional conservation came out of a very object-oriented idea of preserving a thing forever, which is impossible. Like, it's a fiction. Everything's gonna turn to dust. So often in conservation, it's like, oh, we gotta get it at -10 dB, or we gotta set it up with these, mathematical points. And that just, at the end of the day, is not possible with sound. Like me talking right now, I'm vibrating molecules in the air. Each of us is hearing it very differently and experiencing it very differently, and it's incredibly subjective. It's impossible to conserve sound. And a media conservator, we're here to understand the work, but we're then shepherding and then helping translate it into the future. The 40 Part Motet is a motet composed by Thomas Tallis in the 16th century. Janet's idea was miking each of the individual singers and then basically recreating that choral performance in infinity. There's basically 5 versions of this work that exist in the world. Right now it's on loan in a 19th century cathedral in Manhattan, St. John the Divine. Prior to this, I've only seen our edition in more white cube spaces.
I wanted to visibly show the structure of the piece of music in a sculptural way. I really like that it's emotional, religious music, but at the same time, I wanted to almost show the brilliance of how someone can create a virtual soundscape that's physical. So one of the things I wanted to have was that it would be around in an oval. Because if you look at the score, it starts at choir one voice in choir one. And then it builds and it goes to choir 2, 3, 4. And around the room. And then back and forth. I always imagine it like a river or something like that, or you know, waves going back and forth and hitting all the senses in your body. It is kind of relentless. You can't refuse it. Your body takes in this whole structure and how it's moving. I think the brilliance in the composition is that he controls how you feel. He creates this sort of dissonance where you're more on edge, and then all of a sudden there's more harmonics, and then it comes to this emotional sort of uplifting.
Any viewer can do their own mix of the piece. They can sit in the middle, listen to the whole overall mix, moving around them, or they can go up to the individual speakers and really listen individually to each one. That's what I love to do. I have a couple of my favorite singers I go up to. Some of them are now passed away, which is sad, but it's amazing that they're still there singing in the choir.
When we were originally making this, I kind of was almost anthropomorphizing the speakers by thinking, well, should they look a bit like bodies? And then George is going, nah, that's a bad idea. Because then when we saw how the bare speaker becomes two things, it becomes invisible so that people feel free to walk up and get right next to it. But it also becomes anthropomorphic because of the power of the voice. It carries the person. They're like ghosts of people.
I've had the privilege of working with Janet and George at least the past decade. George is sort of more the like technologist, if you will, and Janet is more sort of conceptual. In their works, there's this severity or discordance, but also a beauty and a resolution within that.
It doesn't take much to trigger people's imagination, and I think that's one of the things we always do with sound. We like how the body denies the brain, or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
But why do you think we like that? Isn't
it's part of our thing, man.
Isn't it because that we know people like to be fooled, and we're sort of trying to bring them into the joke? And it's like they see the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, but they still enjoy it. We've created a bit of a mess and a problem for ourselves because we're both kind of collectors. I think we have the theory
that's not a problem.
The theory, if you throw something out, you're immediately going to need it.
That's the rule. If you throw it away, 2 weeks later you're going to say, "Oh man, I really need that." If you keep it, you may never need it.
We have 4 jukeboxes. We also have a pinball player in our storage.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff in it. We call it the prop shop.
We have about 20 of these wooden filing cabinets here. It's gonna be a piece someday.
We've got old audio equipment.
Drums, there's timpanis down at the end there. Racks of all kinds of different old radios. We just collect a lot of stuff that we think might be useful at some point, but who knows if it ever will be.
And then this was a sound effects. Sound of wind.
My favorite part really is the beginning, where it's just the conversations and coughing and things like that. I love just sort of like imagining what it was like in the space when they recorded it over 20 years ago now.
This bit here, yeah.
So we were recording in the medieval hall in Salisbury, and we covered it with
Blankets.
to try and deaden it
Curtains.
as much as possible. We didn't want any reverb in the recording. We wanted the space that you eventually showed it in to give it all the reverb and the timbre.
Where'd you go? To our lavatory.
One of the little girls had to go to the bathroom, so we told the recording people just
Keep recording.
Keep recording. People are talking about the weather and
Last gig they were at or whatever.
But the men's, we only sing weekends. That's great.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay, let's give it a whirl.
When the piece is set up in a room every time, it is essentially sort of mixed to that room, and it can be shown in many different spaces. Each space has its own character, aesthetically and visually, but more importantly, acoustically. We just did recordings of just, clapping the space, just to hear that resonance and the acoustics of it.
So that's a very short reverb. And then, okay, let's do the curved hands. We get a lot of offers of different venues to show motet in, and some of them I'm just going like, what are you thinking? First of all, it's got windows all around and carpet. And we've discovered through showing in some of these places early on that, yeah, the motet can sound terrible. Some of the worst situations for sound are in our modern buildings, the hard walls, the hard floors, the hard ceilings. And the old churches, that's why the voice sounds so amazing. The cathedral was designed for the voices. The cathedral was to take the voices up into the space, into the beautiful high ceilings, and make it sound like angels.
They talk about violins and guitars needing to be worked in. Like a violin needs at least a month or 2 months of playing before it will sound right. And so I sometimes think the spaces we show motet in, it's the same thing. You need to play it, and then somehow it feels like the sound gets into the walls or something, and it starts to sound better.
We know when it's a good sound space
once
because
it's tuned properly, it's because you get goosebumps.
because your body responds.
I still love the moment that it's first turned on. When you hit play, you're performing that work. This piece, it allows a person to experience a performance in a far more intimate way. Instead of just you sitting and watching a choir sing towards you, you're supposed to be within the sound. It turns you inward maybe a bit more and makes you just super aware of how much you bring to a piece of music.
Intimacy in art is super important to me. And I think it's also about craving intimacy. People listen to podcasts all the time because of the loneliness of our culture. Because I grew up in the farm, I understand how intelligent people have to be and how open people are, because it's a small community. And if you're not open, then you're going to really isolate yourself. And you can change someone's thinking about the world with art. Got a note yesterday from somebody who had to stop the car on the way home after hearing 40 Part Motet because he said he started crying. And he started thinking about joy, and he didn't have enough joy in his life. And the piece is very much about joy. I think that's the power of sound working.